Hello again, and welcome to OttaTalk, the City of Ottawa's podcast series where we talk with staff about city programs, projects, and initiatives. Today, city planners will help us demystify Ottawa's zoning bylaw and explain the role it can play in making housing in Ottawa more affordable.
Our theme music to start the show is titled Isa Gomes by Terry Gomes. We begin and end every podcast with a local artist featured on the City Sounds playlist on SoundCloud. You can find a link to our playlist in our show notes, and you'll hear more of Terry Gomes at the end of our podcast. One more reason to stay until the end.
My name is Mike Reed. I'm a Media Relations Officer with the City of Ottawa.
My name is Chloé Saint-Onge, and I'm a Communications Officer with the city. What do you think when you hear zoning bylaw?
Well, I know it's why our neighbors can't build a factory or a smelting plant next door to us. I also think of the many hours I spent on SimCity as a kid instead of doing my math homework. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Any of the city programs or services we talk about will be in the program notes wherever you're streaming this podcast, or you can search for them on the city website, ottawa.ca.
The program notes also have a link to the city's YouTube channel where you will find our entire podcast archive. If you have a comment or question about any of our podcasts, send us a message at podcast-balado@ottawa.ca.
Carol Ruddy has been working with the City of Ottawa for 23 years in various roles. Today, she's the program manager for zoning and intensification. For the last few years, she's been eating, sleeping, and dreaming about Ottawa's new zoning bylaw. Carol, good to see you. Welcome to OttaTalk.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
You earned an MA in Community and Regional Planning at the University of British Columbia. Seems a bit opposite from a lot of friends I have. How did you go from studying out west to working here in Ottawa?
Well, Mike, my family moved here in 2000 and I had my planning degree and I started looking for work and I was lucky enough to start working for the City of Ottawa.
And what made you so passionate about this field that you made an entire career out of it?
Well, I worked in a variety of areas for the city. I started in the heritage team and because I loved heritage buildings and I'd already been involved in heritage conservation in previous work. And from there, I moved into development review and worked on community of adjustment. And it's there that I really learned an appreciation for what zoning means and the difference it makes and what people can do. And really the frustrations with zoning when it's not written properly or when there are errors in it and the importance of it because it does implement policies in the official plan and it does try to strike a balance between the interests of neighbors. And so I just really loved zoning. And from there, I started working for the zoning unit. I've also worked for the official plan team on higher level policies. But I really enjoy zoning because that's where the rubber hits the road for what can happen in a city.
I know a lot of people are engaged with the city on the zoning bylaw project, but for those who aren't, why should they be tuning in? How does zoning affect their day-to-day lives?
Well, the zoning bylaw implements the official plan. And the official plan is once again, something that maybe people don't think about. I'm sure they don't think about it when they wake up in the morning and they're making their coffee. But the official plan directs how the city's going to grow for the next 20 or 25 years. So if you have kids, the official plan is going to direct maybe in the neighborhoods that they may be able to live in. As well for you, it directs where high-rise buildings are permitted. Mike was referring to where factories are permitted. And the zoning bylaw leaps from there. And it's actually the rules, it's actually the regulations that apply when you apply for a building permit. It determines what's permitted on the land. So it's really important for you. Say you want to build a deck. It's at that level. And if you're interested in, say, where are shops going to be permitted in my neighborhood? Well, the zoning bylaw regulates that as well.
So maybe we should step back a little bit and explain a bit of Ottawa's official plan. How did that come about? Because this is what sets the stage for the zoning bylaw review, correct?
Yes, it sure is. Under the Ontario Planning Act, municipalities have to have an official plan to guide how the city grows. At amalgamation, when the four municipalities came together, we got a new official plan for the whole City of Ottawa, for the new city. That official plan really carried forward the former rules. Basically, it was for municipalities that were at the time, maybe 200,000 people. And since amalgamation, we've put, the city's grown a lot. We're approaching, we've gone from around 400,000 or 600,000 people to over 1 million now. Ottawa is a bona fide mid-sized city by any standard. certainly in Canada. And so to address that and the rapid changes that cities and challenges that our cities are facing right now, we got a new official plan in 2022. And that 2022 official plan charts a course for managing how the city will grow and managing the challenges that the city is facing with housing for the next 20 years or so. And it's important that we have a regulatory document at the lot level, which is what a zoning bylaw is, to implement those new directions in our official plan. That's how the new zoning bylaw is coming about. It's coming about after a 3-year process where we got a new official plan for the city that occurred between 2019 and 2022. And then from there, in 2022, council gave direction, all right, staff, now we need a new zoning bylaw to implement this new official plan. And under the Planning Act, we have 3 years to complete that process. So we're coming to the end of that 3 years now, and we're aiming to bring our new zoning bylaw within 3 years of approval of that official plan. And that'll be around December of this year is our deadline. We're going to hit council in January. So we're just a month over the 3 years.
There has been extensive public consultation already about the new zoning bylaw. Can you point to anything that has changed as a result of going to the public and asking for their input?
That's a really good question. And it brings to mind, the work plan that we have for our project. When we were conceiving how we were going to consult in the zoning bylaw, we decided that we needed 3 drafts because it takes 3 rounds of consultations to try and get this right. It is a document that affects the whole city, every lot in our entire city. That's 300,000 parcels of land. And so it takes some time to consult with people. So we issued a first draft in 2024, and then another one early this year in March. And the third and final, so this is the final draft, is being released on September the 8th of this year. And so it'll go live then.
And housing is a priority for the city and for this bylaw. More housing supply means greater housing affordability. So what is in the zoning bylaw that is intended to make it easier to build housing that is affordable?
Oh, there are many things in the new zoning bylaw. So the official plan directs the zoning bylaw to not only create new opportunities for housing, but to create a range of opportunities for different housing types for everybody that lives in Ottawa, regardless of the situation in life. But in particular, we're creating new opportunities for what we call gentle density. So gentle density is low-rise housing. So that's 4 stories or less. And it's the type of housing that we don't currently see very many opportunities for right now. We have many, many zones in Ottawa that limit development. They limit the number of units that you can have on a lot. And for many years, that's prevented sort of new infill development in neighborhoods where people want to live. And it's really shut down the ability for redevelopment to occur in those low-rise neighborhoods. The official plan directs the zoning bylaw to create new opportunities for housing in that low-rise range. And the zoning bylaw really delivers on that direction. So we are going to be having new opportunities for little small apartment buildings, maximum 4 units in them, for example. And in other zones, there'll be a maximum of 6 units permitted in them. And then going up from there, we have new opportunities for small apartment buildings in the 10-unit range. This is really intended to do something that we haven't been able to do before. We've always been very good in Ottawa, as in many other cities, at creating opportunities for housing in high-rise buildings around transit stations, on busy streets, and not everyone wants to live in that location. Then people want to have choices about where they can live. The new zoning bylaw will give those choices in smaller buildings, in existing neighborhoods, close to services, and that's what we really need to try and offer people in terms of housing choice.
I'd like to get into some of those details you're touching on. We always hear concerns, I'll say, that the new zoning laws allow people to build residential buildings as tall as they want, anywhere they want. Entire neighborhoods, are at risk of being turned into apartments. Can you explain, what the rules really say, how they will be implemented, and how that gentle density would look?
Yes, so we get many concerns about people, especially zoning being so technical. People are afraid because there's just so much to understand. And, when you don't have clear information, that really makes people feel uncomfortable. So I'm really glad to have this podcast and start to have these conversations about it. There's a lot to know for zoning, yeah. So first of all, we can start off by where we are right now. I mentioned that there are limits on the numbers of units permitted on a lot in neighborhoods. That certainly is the case right now with the current zoning. The province made changes to the Planning Act to basically require municipalities across Ontario to permit a minimum of 3 units on a lot. So every municipality in every town and city in Ontario, if a lot has municipal water and sewer services, the municipality must permit at least 3 units. And the new zoning bylaw, based on the directions in the official plan and the growth that we're expecting to or anticipating in Ottawa, which is over the next 20 to 25 years between 400,000 and 600,000 new residents needing homes to live in Ottawa. We know that we have to go further in the permissions that are going to be given through zoning to allow more units per lot. But to your point about people being concerned about building height, the zoning bylaw certainly does establish maximum building heights in those low-rise zones. So we're looking at maximum heights of 3 stories. So you're not going to see high-rise buildings of, 10 stories and more, or mid-rise buildings in neighborhoods of 5 stories or more. It's predominantly going to be a maximum of 3 stories. In some existing locations in the city right now, in neighborhoods where 4 stories are permitted, 4 stories will of course be permitted and continue to be permitted in the new zoning bylaw. We're also doing things, to address the livability in neighborhoods by making sure that there's continues to be room for trees as lots redevelop. And so we're introducing new requirements in the new zoning bylaw that we haven't had before to ensure that there are minimum soft areas of landscaping so that there's room set aside on a lot that's big enough for a tree to go, a mid-size or mid-large tree to grow to maturity. There are many things to balance on a lot as redevelopment occurs, but we're really trying hard to make sure that there's enough soft landscaped area for good landscaping.
I understand that the Ottawa Public Health is working with your team. What is that involvement all about? And is there such a thing as healthy land use planning?
Yes, there absolutely is. And our official plan is one of words for having that lens, having a public health lens on land use planning. And so it really is a progressive document in that way and a great model for other municipalities in Ontario and Canada. It does say explicitly that land use planning impacts the health. It makes it easier or harder to be healthy, to have a healthy way of living in a city. And so the official plan really sets that framework for trying to make sure that there's a good mix of land use in neighborhoods so people can have the choice if they want to walk to a little store to shop for milk or something, or that there are services close by for their day-to-day needs and that they can reach those by walking if they want to or going on their bicycle. So these are components of what we call livable and healthy communities. And key to that is that mix of land uses. So it's easier to get services that you need on a day-to-day basis, that there's transportation choices available to people close by in their neighborhoods. And we're working on that through active transportation connections like bike lanes and having sidewalks in neighborhoods, of course, transit and, bus and train options for people to get around. There's a lot to say about livable communities. I could go on for quite some time. I think people may be familiar with the idea of a 15-minute community, and that 15-minute community concept is in the official plan. And that's where you see the reference to having a mix of land uses to make it easier for people to get around. There's also a really nice thing that happens when you go out into your neighborhood. You start to meet your neighbors. You start to get to know the teller the person at the local bank because you can walk there, or the cashier at your grocery store, or if you're walking to get things in your neighborhood, you're more likely to have a conversation with something. These are the soft things. They're not really zoning things, but they're at the basis of the whole idea about livable communities and healthy communities, opportunities for people to actually interact.
There's so much more to know about the zoning bylaw. We could honestly talk about this for hours and we would still have a lot of questions about it. But is there anything we didn't touch on that you think people should know about it?
I'd really like people to know that we've worked really hard to try and develop a zoning bylaw that's going to set the stage, not only to implement the directions in our official plan, which is aiming to make a city that can manage and have homes for all the growth that we're anticipating. But we're trying to do this in a way that will ensure that we also have a nice place to live, that we have livable communities. And there's been so much effort on the part of the zoning team to really bring to the lot level the good directions in the official plan about, having trees as redevelopment occurs, about trying to address, the character of neighborhoods by making, as change occurs in neighborhoods, the new buildings aren't going to be exactly the same, but we're aiming for a size and location a lot that's similar to what's already there in that neighborhood. There's been so much effort into trying to balance the interests of the many stakeholders that we have in the city. So to balance the interests of neighbors and balance the interests of people who are looking for housing in the future, people who are teenagers now and going to be in their 20s and 30s by the time our official plan reaches the end of its lifespan, and we need a new official plan. We need to think about those people who are going to be coming into our neighborhoods and needing places to live. And we're trying to balance their interests with those of the existing people in those neighborhoods. There are so many examples of trying to balance interests. A key direction in the official plan that we haven't mentioned yet is the economic development. And an on-the-ground example of how the zoning bylaw attempts to support economic development is eliminating the restrictions on certain commercial land uses that are arbitrarily restricted right now. And the reason that they're arbitrarily restricted is because for the last 25 years, we've carried forward the permissions in commercial zones from the four municipalities. So from pre-1999 rules about land uses that are permitted. And we're into a whole different phase of this city now. Those rules that from the former municipality that are currently in our mixed-use zones that limit the uses permitted go back to a time before we were amalgamated. They don't reflect the permissions in our old official plan or even our new official plan that we have as of 2022. And it's really important that I like to make the analogy that our zoning bylaw is kind of like a fridge with old food. And every once in a while, you really need to go in there and clean out that old food. And we're trying to make a zoning bylaw that's going to work for the next 20 years for a city that's going to grow by a lot and is facing way different challenges than it did at the time of amalgamation.
So let me get this straight. If a homeowner wants to renovate a structure to allow up to 4 households to live there, they would not need a zoning amendment to seek special permission to do so. However, they still must adhere to other provisions regulating setbacks, site plans, and the building code.
Yes, absolutely. So it would be they must comply with the setbacks in the zone. They can't be any higher than the maximum height in the zone. And they have to make sure to have the soft landscaping that's set aside and so on. So yes, they'd have to, that's absolutely correct, Chloe. They would be able to do that as long as they meet all the provisions for the zone. They can have 4 units.
So when we were prepping for the podcast, we got the impression from planning staff that they kind of wanted to do some bragging about the zoning bylaw. This is, there's a lot to be proud of, but now's your chance. What are you most proud of in the zoning bylaw?
Oh, Mike. Okay, well, thanks for that question. All right, I think a really good example is our residential zones right now. So I'll just start off by saying what applies right now under the current zoning bylaw and what will apply under the new zoning bylaw. So in our current zoning bylaw right now, we have over 140 different zones that apply in this city. And when we did a best practices analysis of zoning bylaws in Canada, Ottawa's bylaw was the most complex by far. And a really complex bylaw presents a lot of challenges administratively for building code services staff, for development review staff. It has arbitrary rules that vary by centimeters. And this just makes development really complicated for homeowners. So not only were there 140 zones, within those zones, there were separate standards. And so that means that there are actually over 600 separate standards within those 140 zones, which just goes further to explain how complicated our zoning provisions are. But we weren't finished there. We are in our current zoning bylaw. No, there are additional pages of zoning provisions that apply to only certain parts of the city. And something called by frustrated residents fuss notes at the end of our tables for all of these separate zoning standards that you had to read the tiny print right down to the very bottom of the page to really know exactly what was going on. And so overall, we had over 117 pages of zoning provisions that applied just in our residential zones. And now in the new zoning bylaw, we've taken and consolidated those rules and simplified them. But it's not one size fits all for the city. So we've gone from over 600 different standards to 26 different standards in the city to reflect the different character of different neighborhoods in the city. And we've gone down from 117 pages of provisions to read through, mind you, to the very end before you know the full story about what your zoning is, down to about 15 pages. That's going to make it so much simpler for someone to understand where a debt goes or how big their addition can be. It's going to make it so much easier for our building code services staff to do their review of building permit plans. So I think that's really something to celebrate. This is going to make everything easier for everyone. Zoning rules should be simpler. We're trying to do the best we can. Zoning is unfortunately complex, but we've done the best we can to simplify things.
Oh, wow. And that's not just going to make it simpler for planners and developers, but residents and homeowners.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Carol. It is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Carol. This is the end of the podcast, but not the end of the conversation. Remember to visit ottawa.ca for more information about the programs you've heard about here. Be on the lookout for upcoming announcements about more City of Ottawa podcasts. That's when we OttaTalk about something completely different. To play us out, here's a little more from Easy Gomes by Terry Gomes from the City Sounds playlist on SoundCloud.